Tonight I am returning to my idea of female role models, actually. This time, not in gaming, but in books, in literature. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Zoe, and Harley is sleeping again. She actually fell asleep really, really early, so I'm terrified she's going to wake up any second. It wasn't even that busy a day. I mean, it was a typical weekendy day, and all of that, but she was walking around quite a lot, and she had all sorts of snacks and stuff, and she was just exhausted, and, got on the boob and just passed out. And I was like, wait, I need to give you a bath and put you in proper PJs, and nope. So she'll probably wake up screaming some point in this Facebook Live. Um, Anyway, so tonight I want to talk a little bit about role models in books. So, for those who didn't watch my thing about role models in gaming, I just want to be clear, like, female role models to me, yes, they are incredibly important, but it's not like ban all men in books or something like that. Like, it's not the point of this. I think that male characters can be important role models for girls. I think that female character can be important role models for boys. I don't think, hey Loma, yay, you're awake and tune in. Um, so I don't think that, you have to be a girl to be inspired by a female role model any more than I think you have to be male to be inspired by a male role model. I think that you can be inspired by either gender, so that's not the point of this. I think it's more just a thing of how cool it is as a girl to see other women doing cool things, even in fiction. That, obviously, if you see an astronaut of any gender, you think, oh, wow, space travel is possible, and that's quite inspiring. But if you see your own gender doing something, it feels that much more attainable or that much more realistic. And also, the fact of the matter is that there's just how many, many more years worth of literature starring men than women, so it's nice to have some cool books that girls can read and go like, ooh, I want to be like this character when I grow up. And so that's kind of my jumping off point is, when I was growing up, I was an absolute bookworm, much like I am now, although obviously I read differently now. With a child, it's don't always have the same amount of time to read as I used to, so not quite as much of a bookworm, I suppose, although at heart I'm still as much of a bookworm. And I would read everything I get my hands on, and a lot of stuff I read had some really great female characters in it. So, I read kids' books, like Harriet the Spy and all those Beverly Cleary books and Judy Blume books. So, it's not to say, that kids' books were completely lacking in female characters. It's just that they never really did stuff the same way that the male characters did. And that's why I kind of want to focus on the young adult genre, because most young adult stories tend to follow a similar plot line in that there's like some sort of evil overarching authority, essentially, for lack of a better word. An evil corporation, an evil government, it's dystopian future, some sort of thing, and basically the story generally follows, some character who's the chosen one to fix everything in this specific society and make everything right. Which is cool. I still like reading books like that, so it's not to say that it's only young adults can be intrigued by this kind of storyline, but that typically is the format of a young adult book. So, whoever the character is finds out about some sort of evil within the overarching corporation, government, dystopian future, whatever, and decides no, they're gonna go against it, and they organize people, and they rise up, and they save the day, yay. Which is great. But in most of the books that I used to read, that wasn't the female character. So, I read everything I could get my hands on. I loved books like The Giver, or, I'm trying to think of, some other, I also read all of those, L.J. Smith books, so The Secret Circle and The Vampire Diaries, which have now been revived and are incredibly popular from TV perspective. So I read all of those growing up, and I really enjoyed them, and often they had really great female characters, but the women themselves weren't really in charge of their own destiny. It was kind of like they were in a love triangle, and depending on which guy they chose, that would determine the outcome for humanity or for vampire society or whatever it might be. Which is the trend that you see again in Twilight. So Twilight, which I was not a fan of, I was too old to fall into the Twilight trap. Twilight did the same exact thing. Yes, it has a female main character, but it really has less to do with her changing the world, deciding the future, and more with it being like, well, depending on who she picks as her boyfriend, that will determine the course of history. There are some notable exceptions. One of my all-time favorites that I think I read, I don't know, I think I read it till it fell apart, was a book called The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle. I don't know if anyone ever still reads this book, but it was about like a very prim and proper teenage girl doing an Atlantic crossing, back in the time of ships and all of that. And then she finds out like the captain who'd been so nice to her was actually evil, and she ends up becoming one of the sailors and like runs away to join the ship crew and stuff like that. I don't know. It's quite a cool book, and in that it had nothing to do with romance. It had nothing to do with any of that. It was just her finding herself and figuring out what would work best for her future and for her life, and making that decision. So that was a cool one, but most of them tended to follow the sort of like, I'm a teenager, I have raging hormones, and depending on who I pick as my boyfriend, that's going to determine the outcome of civilization. Which, look, is not a terrible format, but it's not really empowering for women. Like, it ends up still being a thing of like, yeah, you're an important character, but you're not as important as the choice you make of who you decide to romance or be romanced by. So, what I've seen lately, though, and yes, I do still read more young adult fiction than I should probably admit to, but I do still read quite a bit of young adult stories, and what I've seen now, and in general in fiction, is that women are obviously taking a more central role in the story, and then taking a more central role in that defining thing of, I'm going to be the one to overthrow society, I'm going to be the one to change the status quo. So like, for me, I think it sort of started with the Harry Potter franchise, and I want to give a lot of credit to Hermione. She's not a main character, so I think it's important to put that out there. Like, Harry is the chosen one, Harry's the important one, blah blah blah. But Hermione, he wouldn't have gotten anywhere without Hermione. I mean, she's the brains of the operation, and I really, really like that about the series. I really think that's important, that there's a series of books out there where you have two boys as two of the central characters. You have Harry and Ron, and they're fine, they're nice, and they're, the chosen one, and the one with the family and the background and blah blah blah. But she's the one who actually knows what's going on and can figure all this stuff out and figure out who the good guys are and the bad guys are and the theories behind everything. She's the one who can figure out, like, oh, this is what a Horcrux is, this is how it must work, this is what we need to do, this is how we're going to do this. And she's kind of, the one who makes sure that they survive and have a tent and have a place and have food and, everything that they need. She's the one who organizes. And she actually does some ass-kicking herself. I mean, she actually does, destroy some of the threats to them, some of the big puzzles, but she's not the central character. So she paved the way for future central characters, for future women to be in those kinds of roles, but she herself is not that. Just as a side note, I really don't think she should have ended up with Ron. Like, I know he's really nice and stuff. And even J.K. Rowling has come out and said, like, she originally had written that they would end up together, and she never really strayed from that. Actually, looking back, she thinks Hermione and Harry should have been together, which I would agree with, if not for the idea that surely there are more people in the wizarding world, and Hermione is this brilliant, beautiful, interesting character. Like, she should have probably gone beyond high school and, studied further and traveled and met other wizards and, partied and I don't know, like, it can't be that in the whole of the wizarding world these two guys are the only options. If you have to pick your boyfriend based on who you go to high school with, should have been with Harry, but surely there were more wizards for Hermione to choose from, and Ron wasn't the only wizard in the world that was gonna love her, because he was really weird, like, in the end, and really possessive and creepy. Anyway, enough about Ron and Hermione. So I think Hermione paved the way for future female characters who could be strong, could be smart, could be, you know, take on that role of, being sort of the central, the linchpin in the group. And for me, the real example of that and how that progressed was in the Hunger Games. So what's interesting about the Hunger Games to me is Katniss has many of the same traits we've seen before. She's really smart, she's really strong, she's really brave, she loves her sister, she's courageous, she volunteers for the Hunger Games, to take her sister's place, and, that's quite a big deal. And she also has these two guys who are interested in her. She's got Gale, who's been in love with her since forever, and who she has this long-standing hunting relationship with in their hometown. And then there's Peeta, who, she kind of has a thing, kind of knows before she gets, into the Hunger Games situation, but it's really in the games that she gets to know him and then completely manipulates him and uses the fact that he's in love with her to benefit her performance in the games. And it feels like a complete manipulation. And yes, maybe she starts to fall for him and kind of have feelings, and it's a bit of a humming and hawing type thing. And eventually she has to choose between the two guys and, go rescue Peeta and all of that. What I like about this, though, is that she is still going to change the world. She is still going to overthrow the dystopian setup. She is still going to be the badass. She's going to be the central character. And oh, by the way, she also has to pick which guy she likes. So there's the love triangle, which we're kind of used to in these young adult stories. We're very used to having a female character with two guys in love with her. Like, that just seems to be the norm. I don't know what I suppose it's like the female fantasy, maybe, or the male fantasy. I don't know. Everybody's fantasy that there's this girl who's so great that all the boys fall in love with her. But what I like about Katniss is that her story doesn't depend on which boy she decides she wants to be with. It's not like, now she'll pick this boy and he'll overthrow the patriarchal regime or whatever for her. It's like, no, she is still going to be a figurehead. She is still going to be the most important character. But, by the way, these two guys love her and she needs to make that decision on top of everything else. So I think that's quite cool. You see this also in the Silo series. I don't know if any of you read that, the Wool from that kind of thing. Also dystopian thing, dystopian future, weird silos underground that are like a survival situation. Again, we have some really interesting male characters that pop up in it, but the main character is a woman who knows how to get stuff done and is like, we're going to build a digging machine, we're going to do this, I'm going to figure that out, blah, blah, blah. Like, she's the one who is pushing these things forward. And I see more and more of these stories coming out that are women-driven. And I put a lot of that on Hermione, but I also think that Katniss draws a lot of that inspiration, but takes it the step further. So takes it beyond, but they need the boy to make it happen. And it's more like, no, they can be the master of their own destiny. And I think, like I said, it doesn't really matter in the sense of like, oh, Harley will only read stories with female role models. Like, that's just unrealistic and silly. Like, if a story is well written and interesting and good, of course I will want her to read it. Like, I really want her to read Harry Potter one day. I really want her to read The Hunger Games, because I actually really enjoyed those. Like, they're not, earth-shattering literature or something, but they're really enjoyable to read. The same goes, hi Liz! I still want her to read The Giver. I still want her to read some of these stories that have male protagonists and female protagonists. Like, it has nothing to do with, these are the only books she will be allowed to read because she must only know that women are strong. I just think that it's really nice to have more variety for her, that she can read about, the Maze Runner and these male characters who are so strong, powerful, and figure stuff out, and then the female characters who can do the same. And one of the things I like about Katniss as a character is that she's incredibly smart. She's an incredible badass. I think the archery thing does it for me. Like, I had this when I talked before about Lara Croft and Aloy. It's one of my gaming thing. I have such a thing for these women who can do archery because, like, I think deep down I wish that I knew how to do archery and kill everyone from really far away. So Katniss definitely has the archery thing going, which is awesome. But it goes beyond that. It's she's also able to be a really good friend and be a good sister and love deeply the people who she cares about. You know, that she can mourn the loss of a friend or, you know, a fellow Hunger Games competitor or whatever. You know, she can cry and be emotional and still be really strong. And I think those are the sorts of lessons that I want Harley to see, and that's often what's missing from men in young adult literature. So the male characters are either so completely like weak-willed, like they just kind of kind of like a wet dishcloth or something. I don't know, like they just don't really do anything, and they're just kind of whiny and mopey, and you're like, well, just make a plan, do something about it. Whereas the women kind of push that forward in their books, so the ones were female focused, then the women are really strong, and the men are what they are. In the male-led young adult books, like, they're real strong and they're going to overthrow the patriarchy and they're going to do this and do that. But they're never allowed to really be emotional. They're never allowed to actually connect with other people. They're never allowed to, you know, if they do have romantic involvements, it's like almost a setup that they have to fall in love so that their love interest can be killed so that then they have a reason to go on killing spree. Whereas the female characters just tend to be more nuanced in that sense. There tends to be a bit more like, well, yeah, she is in love with this guy, but she also is a really good friend to this one, and she also has these feelings, and she's also vulnerable, and she's also emotional, and still strong. And I think that's the lesson that I want Harley to see in these books. I think that's the thing that I want to share with her, is that, you know, being strong and being a revolutionary and being a forward thinker and being unique doesn't mean that you have to shut off every other aspect of your personality. It doesn't mean that you have to ignore the rest of who you are as a human being, that you have to deny your other emotions because, you know, being sad or loving someone is, you know, somehow seen as a weakness. And in most of the male-led young adult stories, that's the case. Whereas in the female-led ones, characters can have moments of despair or doubt or concern and then rise above. And I think that in itself is a stronger message for girls and boys than this idea that, you know, the hero never wavers or the hero never loses faith or always knows that he's going to be the hero. It's like none of us actually know that we're always going to be a hero. You know, everyone has moments of fear and doubt and self-loathing and, you know, imposter syndrome and whatever else. But it's the fact of feeling that and then saying, well, you know what, I might feel that way, but I'm still going to push through and I'm still going to do what needs doing. That's a role model. That's what you can look up to. So that's why I think that Hermione paved the way for Katniss. That's why I think that young adult novels now are so much better at creating female characters that aren't just, you know, pick male love choice A or B to save the world, but rather, you know, go save the world, and by the way, all the men are going to throw themselves at you. Pick one. Or don't. I mean, that's also something I'd like to see in future sort of stories. It's like, well, maybe you don't have to choose. Maybe just do what you want to do and see what happens and be a young adult and get into trouble. And just keep seeing what happens and figure it out as you go along. I don't know. That's kind of my sense of these books. Like, I like reading them, and I like the idea of having a whole list of them for Harley to read as she grows up, and that, you know, she can read the ones I read all those years ago, and she can read the newer ones, and have a real spectrum of role models of characters and traits that she can look up to. Maybe. Probably by the time that comes, she'll be reading such different stuff, if she's a bookworm. I really hope she's a bookworm. So yeah, that's my whole thing on female role models and Hermione and Katniss. I don't know if any of you have any questions. I'm gonna have my sip of hot chocolate though, no, because it's nice. It's cold tonight, but not as cold as it was last time. And I think the only other thing about Hermione, this whole Hermione and Ron thing, like I don't want to harp on it, but I think it highlighted the fact, like, it's something that a lot of writers do where they plan out their stories so far in advance that they don't let the characters grow organically. And like, if you think about it, Hermione had all that time with Harry in the woods solving puzzles and fighting evil and all that. This is the end of the whole thing. You would have thought that they would have fallen for each other by then. Like, you would have thought they'd realize, actually we belong together, actually we have more in common, we're both smart, we're both, a bit more interesting. I don't know, I never clicked with Ron. In the books or the movies, like, he never did it for me. He was like Harry's fun sidekick friend, but I never really saw what Hermione would see in him, and I think that was my issue. Oh, and Hermione will fall in love with Ron, but why? Like, why? Why would such a smart, confident... Well, she wasn't that confident. Obviously, she had moments... Again, she had moments of real self-doubt and, all of that. But she rose above, and she came out of it, and it's like, so why would she hook up with Ron? And also, why? Why in the Harry Potter universe must they marry whoever they go to high school with? Like... Anyway, that is my chat for tonight. I know it's not as long as last time, but I think that's everything I needed to say about how Hermione paved the way for Katniss. And I don't see any questions from all of you, so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And please be sure to like Born Geek and subscribe and all of that, and share this if you enjoyed it, because then more people can see what I have to say about random geeky topics and parenting topics. And I will be going live every Sunday and every Wednesday at 8 o'clock South African time, so I hope to see you all again soon. Have a nice night. Bye.